back to the channel. Welcome back to our 2022 BRZ build. So, time to do some more comparisons. And does this fit? So what I've got is a 2015 stock 2-liter FRS header in my hand. That came from that car, which has an aftermarket header. So we're about to pull some things off of that car and see exactly what fits on the blue 2022 and vice versa. So stay tuned for some exciting content. And here's another little kind of while you're in there discovery. So the OEM filter at the bottom is the 2.4 liter filter, and the one at the top is a K&N out of the 2.0. And what you'll notice right away is actually the surface area of the 2.4 stock is larger than the 2.0 K&N filter. So overall large surface area for a motor that breathes more. We have the headers off of the 2022 BRZ, the OEM headers from a 2015 FRS, and an aftermarket set of headers that we had on our FRS. So first of all, good news. The headers are completely interchangeable between the two generations in terms of the flanges here, the spacing, so we're able to bolt this on to the new car without any issues, and then this flange is the same. However, there are some notable differences between the years. So let's first go over the OEM headers. This is a 2015 FRS header, and this is the 2022 2.4 liter BRZ header. So taking a set of calipers, the diameter of the piping inside here of the 2015 is 39 millimeters, and the diameter of the piping on the new car is pretty much the same. There's no real discernible differences on the ID of the piping on the at the head. However, things get a little bit more interesting once we move down here. So as you can see, the OEM header is a 4 into 2 and then into 1. And this is the 2015, and the pipe that goes from the first collector here and into the catalytic converter. So if you measure that, you're looking at 42.5 millimeters. And if you measure the piping on the 2.4 liter car on the OEM header, you got a 54 millimeter diameter piping, outer diameter, and it's visually larger. Now you can see that the routing is slightly different between the two cars as well, but the overall design, with perhaps this not being as efficient and as nicely done as the new car, but overall the biggest difference is the diameter of the piping, going from this first junction to the catalytic converter. And also here at the outlet of the catalyst, so this is on the 2015 car, we're looking at 50.5 millimeters. And if we take the 2022 2.4 liter here, we're looking at 57.43 millimeters. So it is overall larger. We went back to our 2015 FRS here and measured this. So it is, if I can get the calipers on there properly. So this is an aftermarket pipe, and it is 61. So still a little bit larger than even the 2.4 headers. So now let's look at the aftermarket headers. I know there's a lot of choices out there, and this is just what we happen to have here. So this is a header made by Borla, and the diameter here of the piping on this particular header, so at the inlet it is 43. However, the diameter of the piping as we go down the rest of the header, it's only around 41 millimeter versus the OEM headers, which are, as you remember, a little bit larger. This is 44, and it's about 43 and a half. So overall, the aftermarket catalytic, not catalytic converter, but the aftermarket header rather, has this design where it's 4 into 1. And there is no catalyst on this piece. So there is a catalyst in there in the exhaust after the header, but there is no catalyst on this piece. But overall, the piping diameter is slightly smaller than both of the OEM headers. And specifically, it's definitely smaller than what we have here past this collector. So now that we've checked fitment and looked at the dimensions, now it's time to see if these aftermarket headers make power on the new car. And it's also interesting to see how the OEM 2.4 headers do on the older car. So let's jump right into that.
The installation of the Borla header, which is the 4-into-1 unequal length header on the 2.4 car, is complete. So everything fits exactly as it does on the 2.0 car. And now it's just a matter of getting this on the dyno and seeing what gains, if any, there are to be made.
BRZ is back on the dyno. This time, an only change that we've made to it is that we've added those headers, which you can see right there. So that's it. That's only change, and we're about to find out what they do, if anything. Finished dynoing the BRZ with the Borla headers. So keep in mind, nothing else was changed on the car aside from swapping out the OEM 4-to-2-to-1 headers with a set of Borlas that we had on our FRS. And you've seen, of course, that the Borla headers had overall smaller diameter piping than the OEM headers. So the results, well, the dotted line is the OEM header line, and then the solid line is the one with the Borla headers. And you can see immediately in this region where the torque dip is most apparent on the completely stock car, the Borla headers takes care of this and brings us more torque from about this point here, so right around 3,500 RPM and all the way up to close to 6,000 RPM. Up in this region, however, there is a loss in power compared to those OEM headers. So the overall loss in power, in peak power that is about 6 horsepower between the OEM headers and the Borlas. And then here, the gain in peak torque, we're looking at about 13 foot-pounds. But really what you care about is the area under the curve. So the area under the curve, you can get a really good sense of which car is faster if you, instead of putting it in terms of engine speed, you look at it in terms of time. So we're going to put these in terms of time and have a look at it right here. And when you put the two runs in terms of time, you can see that the car with the headers finished the run just a little bit quicker, 13.872, the full fourth gear run, versus just past 14 seconds for the car with the OEM headers. And the reality is that you spend a lot of time in this region here. And because of that, you're probably going to benefit even more from eliminating that torque dip. This is something that was seen in the 2.0, and it again seems to be true in the 2.4. Of course, with tuning, we get a lot more flexibility, and I'm really looking forward to that being available so we can really smooth out that power band and potentially add more to the top end. However, just headers alone, this unequal length 4-into-1 design does eliminate a large piece of the stock torque dip. However, there is a penalty up here. So just because I had the car on the dyno and I wanted to see if we can get some of that back, I pulled out the air filter and took another run at it, and you can see here that if I put it back in terms of engine speed, with the air filter pulled out and the headers installed, now I got back some of that peak. So now I've got back my 6 horsepower that was lost. So there are things you can do in terms of hardware. to get that back. But I also like to think that, you know, a different set of headers, perhaps with larger runners, would allow us to have a reduction in the torque dip that we're seeing here, and at the same time not lose the top end. So perhaps the runner size is not optimized here. Perhaps there's a design that is not optimized here, and we're going to continue digging at this until we find something that's really optimal. And of course, we're going to overlay this with tuning solutions that will really take whatever hardware you have on there and will optimize it as much as possible. And just to put this in context once again, so I'm going to throw in the 2.0 dyno graph, and this is with those same headers that was on this card that we've now moved on to 2.4, and you can see that now there isn't such a big gap here because we've managed to recover some of that torque dip with the headers in there, so it kind of mimics the 2.0 power curve. I'll bring this in close. You can see how close they are. It's just offset with the 2.4 making more power everywhere, which we saw in the previous video. So I'm looking forward to testing some more parts out, and more importantly, we're going to take those 2.4 OEM headers, fit them on the 2.0 where you do have a tuning solution readily available, and we're going to see just how they perform on that 2.0. So we're normalizing for the car that we're using because we had the Borlas on there before. Now we're going to throw the OEM headers from this BRZ and really get into the meat and potatoes of the performance difference between the two headers once we have a tuning solution in place. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the channel. Give us a call if you've got any questions in terms of tuning. These cars, it's really very interesting to go through these details with a very fine-tooth comb. But this is what's really going to grow our understanding and our capability to, at the end of the day, offer the best solutions for these cars, for both the 2.4 and the 2.0, because here you're really talking about a game of optimization. So take care, guys. We'll talk to you next time.